everybody. My name is Kim Stock, and I am an ELA and EL teacher at McCain High School. And I'm also the 2021 Red Clay and Delaware Teacher of the Year. Thank you so much for joining us. And if we could just take a minute to introduce ourselves, we'll go to my left.
Sure.
Yeah.
I'm Kim DeYoung, and I'm a social studies teacher at Dickinson, the John Dickinson School. I should use the correct name and not the nickname. I teach 6th and 7th grade, so 6th grade geography and 7th grade civics and economics.
I am Erin Rivera. I teach 4th grade at North Star. I am the 21-22 Teacher of the Year.
I'm Matthew Marion. I am the music teacher at Linden Hill Elementary School, and I was the 2022 Red Clay Teacher of the Year.
All right. So the topic is about the pandemic. And I suppose in many ways we're still kind of in the pandemic and maybe monkeypox season, who knows?
I can't do it.
Maybe a couple different things. And so when you think about the pandemic, like what is something that you learned about yourself as a teacher? Maybe we could start there. What did you learn about yourself as a teacher during the pandemic, which is still occurring?
I would say one of the big things that kind of changed for me was putting more of the focus on the process. So I'm a music teacher, so a lot of my job has always been focused on like the performance at the end of the year. You're always working towards a theater production or a chorus concert, and that kind of went away. So in April, we had our first concert performance in over 2 years. Yeah. So for those 2 years, it's difficult to not have that performance, so it kind of changed my perspective. Instead of always looking towards what is our end goal, kind of appreciating the music making that we were doing in the moment, not just always focused on an end, but what are we learning today in class? What are we experiencing together, and how are we growing as people, as musicians, despite maybe there isn't a formal end of year concert?
Makes sense. I think it was tough. I was remote all year, and I was moved to a different grade for that year.
Right.
And I think what I learned most that has affected me now as a teacher is being remote with 42 kiddos, 5th graders.
Oh,
and
wow.
I had to figure out how to make a connection with them, even though we were through a computer. And I had to figure out different ways to teach than I would have in my classroom because it was really different. And they're 11. So it was really, really strange. And I think when I came back into the classroom this past year, I was able to take some of that with me. Like I can make connections this way with this child who really is not trying to make a connection with me, or they're not getting this math concept, but let me pull up what I did with the 5th grade with this one thing last year.
Right.
Even though we were online, maybe that's the way I can get in. And so it had me look at things in different ways, which I think was helpful.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, besides all the tears, because
so
there were
many
a lot of
tears.
tears.
So many tears.
I think the one thing that it definitely taught me was the organization aspect. So, in middle school, using Schoology all the time now, I incorporated like week of folders because I realized that school shouldn't be like a surprise. And I thought about that then as somebody like I started school again. And, at the beginning of the semester, you get everything, laid out in the syllabus, you get the due dates, you get the assignments. So there's no secrets. There's no like, aha, I'm going to get you. And not that we do that, but I realized the need so that students could feel safe and secure with what we were doing, especially if they weren't in the classroom. And that was the biggest struggle, I feel, like just going back and forth between, you have 150 kids. How do you determine who's out for what and when? And so having a week of folder, which gave directions for every time we met that week. Right. And then in that folder, it housed all the stuff. So nobody was having to miss out. So not only did I feel like that helped the students, because then it wasn't a surprise, and it wasn't like the dread, I got to come back and make up all this stuff. It really helped me with my organization, because I wasn't that organized before COVID as much as I thought I was. And that was definitely my lesson, the organization aspect.
It's funny you say that because I did the same thing. I switched to week of folders in all my subjects. And so now if your kiddo was absent last year, I mean, it's like, that's what I did when I was remote teaching. And then I kept it last year and it was like, your kid was out last Tuesday. It's in Schoology.
Yeah.
Find the week they were out. It's all there. So that part has been, it's funny because you're doing it in high school. I'm doing it in elementary the same way.
Yeah. I don't know. I do appreciate that part. And then it saves the kids coming, what did I miss?
Right.
Well, we did not pause. We did
may
not
still ask
stop
us all
and
the
just
things.
sit around and sing Kumbaya until you returned. But yeah, that was, so it definitely helps with that issue.
With how many people were out, that wouldn't have been possible even if we could handle it that way.
Yeah.
It was like wave after wave of kids being out. And it wasn't just 2 kids because the tummy flu's going around. I mean, it was, and we had classes where half the class is out.
Yeah.
It's crazy. I couldn't believe it. And in the beginning, I was very overwhelmed with how to manage them being out and still needing the instruction. And it was I was like,
Definitely.
you missed the entire math unit. I don't know.
I know.
I don't know where to begin.
Right. Exactly.
So it was daunting, I think.
So I think that those are all, like, I think just about every teacher in America could probably relate to the things that people are saying. I mean, everything that you guys are all saying. So now we have another year coming up, right? We're getting ready to return to the 2022-2023 school year. And I'm just anticipating what this year will be like. And is there anything like from these lessons that you've learned about yourself or your students during the pandemic that you're going to kind of take with you for this year? Like, what will we do? What will we do this year to make this year special, despite the fact that the last couple of years have been so crazy for all of us? And are you nervous? And are you nervous?
I think similar to what Kim and Erin were saying, the digital tools that we've acquired during the pandemic are really helpful, and they're something that even once we go beyond the pandemic, I think they're still going to be useful to us, and we can still use them. And for example, I feel like before the pandemic, so I'm in a position where I teach music and I'm the only music teacher in my building. So it's very isolating where you don't have a colleague that teaches the same class as you that you can go to see what they're doing. But with Zoom now, my elementary music team meets on a regular basis, and it's so over the last 2 years I've met with them more over the last 2 years than the rest of my career combined.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah, so it's a lot less isolating. So it's taking those skills and those tools that we acquired, and even though we're not going to be virtual, being able to take those and use them to help keep propelling us forward.
And right now with all the challenges that everyone is dealing with, it's nice to not feel like you're by yourself on an island. So that's
absolutely.
so nice.
I agree. Yeah, I mean, I feel like, just kind of thinking about my own question about this year, I fully want to believe that this year is going to be normal, whatever that means. But I just know realistically it's not going to be. And I think that we are, looking towards a difficult year because everybody has this collective trauma. Our students certainly do. We certainly do. Our administrators, staff, everybody has this, parents, community, everybody's in this really collective trauma. And so we haven't really gotten out of the trauma, and yet we have waiting for us pacing guides and a new curriculum and the community saying, well, why did your scores go down, and what are you guys doing, and why are you spending all this money on programs that you don't need? You should be just teaching them reading and writing. It's and so I do feel nervous about kind of some of the expectations from the outside, and then I think maybe even my own expectations and my desire for us to kind of not be in so much collective trauma. But I don't know if we're quite there yet, so I'm a little nervous about that.
Do you feel though part of the world is moving on, and then part
Right.
is like still stuck back in dealing with what you had
Right.
said, like with the trauma,
Yeah.
having to be able to cope with what we need to do to be
Right.
successful, and to continue to roll on with the idea that, hey, can we go back to normal?
Right.
When so many people are pushing for it,
Right.
but yet feel like you're in this position.
Right. Yeah, and it's not even normal, but I mean, we're all going to be looking at new teacher evaluation systems. And so on top of everything else, we're going to say goodbye to DPAS, which has been something that's been with us for a long time,
Yeah.
right? And so now we're all, including our administrators, are all learning something completely new, and yet we've never been able to really catch our breath. Yeah. Yeah. So it does make me feel a bit nervous, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I'm with you. I'm very nervous. I wore masks all year last year. I haven't decided where I'm at right now when I go back. I feel like among the community and parents, the pandemic's been so polarizing and so exhausting and so draining. And then to have new things coming as well, new curriculums, new evaluations, and then I've got new kids coming in. I haven't even started yet. I'm drowning.
Right.
So I'm not quite sure what the year's going to look like. I try to picture it, and then I'm like, well, I don't really know because they changed this. And is this the time to make those changes, or do we stick with what we know, do what we can while we figure out everyone's needs, and while we figure out what the kids need? I mean, we've got half these kids learned to read in their bedrooms. So do we stick with what we know and let teachers use the resources they already know and are familiar with to do the best they can for the students that are going to be walking into their classroom? And so as a teacher, I'm nervous, I'm excited, and I'm overwhelmed.
I think with change, there's always that anxiety that comes with it.
Absolutely.
And I struggle because like one part of my brain says, well, now is the time to make those modifications because there's so much that hasn't been working prior to COVID. So when we think about like how many students are proficient within, ELA at 3rd grade or math, like that part, I feel like, okay, well, maybe now is the time. It still doesn't take away though the anxiety and as much as people try to like throw in self-care, that looks different with everybody. And it almost becomes like that. I know like last year I felt like that toxic positivity phrase was like used a lot, but we all definitely felt that. So it's like, how do you juggle in an appropriate way that's not in a an addictive route, to handle all the changes.
Right. You don't. You tread water.
Yeah.
And I remember saying last year, if one more person tells me about self-care, I'm going to pull up my hair and scream, and then I'm going to leave.
Yeah.
Because it's unbelievable. And then I see online article after article after article, and studies even being done about how negative it actually is to bring up self-care in situations where you can't help provide or the space for that self-care.
To do that.
So just, that'd be like if you're actually drowning, and I'm like, use your life raft. But there's no life raft.
What does that look like?
Grab your floaty. It's way over here. You can't get to it.
Is mine
Grab
missing?
your floaty. And that's where it's at. And we just, I think, keep doing the best we can, and everybody just needs to remember that we're all drowning. And hopefully we will get to that point where we feel like we have our sea legs again.
So like one thing that I started like in the pandemic is a regulation poll. So with my students. So at the beginning of every single class, I asked them, how are you feeling? And last year, like when we were on Zoom, it was easy to have like a Zoom poll and multiple different options. But then when we came back last year, I was like, how am I going to do this? I'm like, well, might as well just do the little thumb. And so thumbs up, thumbs in the middle, thumbs down. And it was funny because I actually had students say, well, Mrs. DJ, I don't feel like this. So maybe on like a 45-degree angle, And what was good about it was getting students, because they didn't do that at the very beginning. Because to go ahead and say, well, how do you feel right now is a very difficult, it's difficult even for adults to express their emotions and not think about what's going on last week or the anticipation of what's going to happen tomorrow. So I think like taking that time at least not only did that I feel help my students to be able to determine their emotions then, but then it kind of helped me. I'm not gonna lie, because then you know what, y'all, my last class was a struggle. And then it's funny because they knew, or my son's sick and I'm upset by that, or just anything, but having that opportunity for them to express themselves, for me to also express myself with them, I don't know, I just felt that it gave that safe place to be able to have those emotions. And I think, like, for all of us, that's really the first step, is just being able to say, you know what, right now, I'm just a hot mess. And whether that then somebody else, yeah.
Bring back that human element to the students and the parents and the teachers. We're all human.
Right.
And I think sometimes that gets forgotten and pushed to the side.
Yeah.
So.
Absolutely. Yeah. So do you think this is the biggest issue currently facing teachers, is this balance of the self-care and worrying about the students socially and emotionally, and trying to balance that with these new curriculums and expectations to, close the learning gap and all of these things that are kind of being pushed upon us?
Absolutely.
I saw a quote, kind of going back to self-care, I saw a quote last year that has really stuck with me. It was, self-care isn't about bubble baths. It is about creating a life for yourself that you don't need to escape from. Mm-hmm. And that has really stuck with me, because I keep thinking about, am I contributing to a life that I want to escape from? Or am I contributing to a life that I want to, that I don't want to leave, I don't want to have breaks from? I can't wait until, winter break. And I'm not really sure. And I think that what worries me the most when I talk to teachers up and down the state, and honestly, I mean, across the nation, is that our best teachers are so burnt out. Really, really burnt out. And it's, and I hear many teachers say, fine, I'm just going to work the contract hours. And we all know what that means, because none of us just work contract hours. And we know, what might happen or what we may not be able to accomplish if we just work our contract hours.
Right.
And, and so I think a lot of teachers are having that discussion amongst ourselves, like, what do we do? And we see the news articles, there's a teacher shortage. There's not a teacher shortage. It's their teachers are there. It's just that they don't want to be teachers. Our very best and brightest, our very best and most effective teachers don't want to be teachers anymore. And honestly, this really does keep me up at night. I don't know.
It's heartbreaking.
I don't know.
Right.
I don't know where we start.
I think that's brings us back to that challenge we talked about with the self-care, and how it's not helpful to just bring it up and to say, remember self-care, because there's no 5-minute fix. It's about fixing the environment and making your work a place that you enjoy and is productive and helpful. It's not something that you can say, here's this quick 5-minute fix and it fixes your day. You need to, create an environment where your work day is productive and it's something you value. And it can't be fixed in a snap of a finger.
Well, and teaching really is one of those professions of passion. People feel called to it. You don't generally just fall into a teaching job. So I think finding ways to remember that this is a profession and not just a job. These are professionals, and teachers need to be treated like they went to school and they know what they're doing, and have that valued. And then I think at that point, when teachers start to feel heard and valued and respected, I think we'll start to see some of that passion come back. That's the job for me. And I've pictured it since I was 7. And I think we'll start to see some of that come back. But it's like a culture change.
So as we're approaching the school year, how do you approach challenging conversations with students? I know we talked a lot last year with the pandemic and some of the struggles that brought up. So how do you kind of foster these conversations within your classrooms?
I think this is going to be very different for
I was
all
going
of
to
us.
say, because we represent
levels.
high school, so I'm going to talk about a high school perspective that may or may not work for elementary. One lesson I learned last year is during the first week, I had my students fill out a survey like I normally do. What are your hobbies? What are things that you like a teacher to do? Blah, blah, blah. What are things that work for you in the classroom? And then one of the questions I added was, what pronouns do you use for yourself?
Mm-hmm.
And most of my students were English learners, and so they put all the pronouns because they didn't understand the question, and so I realized, okay, that was a kind of like a light bulb for me. Okay, I needed to explain that first, and then say, because maybe my students weren't aware that there are some people who have a pronoun that might be different than what you might assume, and so we don't want to assume those pronouns, and the reason why I was asking, and so that was kind of that was a learning lesson for me. So I know this year that I need to approach that question a little bit differently, but I know just something small, like on Zoom, just putting my name and then my pronouns, was something that students would send me messages, thank you for doing that. And so it has something small has made a difference. But that's a high school perspective. What is
So I will say, in seventh grade is civics, is what we do in social studies. And one of the major units is called Project Soapbox. And it's an opportunity for students to be able to research an issue they feel passionate about, and then actually give a speech in front of their peers about that issue. And some of the topics have ranged from LGBTQ plus rights to like mental health issues, to racism, to climate change, but honestly, like just a huge spectrum of issues. And I would not be able to have conversations or have students have those conversations if I hadn't already done the legwork of building the classroom with empathy. Right. So I can see, like, at the beginning of each class, I said before, like, we do the regulation poll, and I also ask everybody like a non-related question of the day. And something simple that, and every class there's a question of the day, and they give a response. And what that does is just to build that classroom community in the sense that, all right, you know what? I didn't realize that they like that. I kind of like that too, And so having that and then teaching them, I jokingly at the last presidential debate had said they didn't have me as their teacher because they would have known better on how to behave and how to respond with differences, and I think that's the big part of at least of what I teach is like to say, okay, you're allowed to have a voice, you're allowed to have an opinion, and so is everybody else, but we need to know how to navigate that voice and how to handle listening to other people talk. So the discussions, and again, seventh grade, every time they have their main stage Project Soapbox, like I tear up because I think about the fact that when I was seventh grade, I could have never done that. I could have not gotten in front of my peers. I mean, one student, she talked about how like feminine hygiene products should be free for all children, and then no lie, a month later we got them in the schools because of there was that House bill.
So like
and even like it was it just things like that. Listening to them talk about how the world is affecting them. I don't know. I'm in awe. I'm in awe of how well students are able to articulate those things.
Now, what would you say as far as like being an elementary music teacher? There might be some interesting opportunities for you there.
Yeah, definitely. And I think a lot of what Kim was saying with like you can't walk in one day, just create this environment and expect students, to feel comfortable sharing. For students to know how to listen respectfully. So it is that process where obviously you created this environment and this culture where your students come in and they feel comfortable. And I feel like I'm in this unique position where I teach my students for 6 years. I have them from when they're 5 until they're ready to go off to middle school. So it's just this, I think it's important, just this constant building of respect, and similar to what you were saying, where it's not just, like you're not going to agree with everything the person next to you says. You're not all going to share the same opinion, but you're going to respect, how they're presenting, and you're going to give a respectful response if you want to share your side of it. But just creating that environment where students feel comfortable sharing and are able to respectfully listen to each other.
Definitely. And I agree. I think it's all about just creating that culture in your classroom where everybody feels safe and respected.
Yeah.
And in elementary, I feel like some of the topics that you probably hear in secondary don't usually come up as much in elementary. When they do, it's usually because something happened.
Right.
And the child is either upset or scared or worried. So at that point, it's my job as the teacher to just kind of let them know that, yes, they're valid, and let's talk about helping them feel safe and what tools they have to deal with whatever that topic may be. And really fostering, like, this child did this or this child. It's a lot of counseling sessions. We have a lot of sit-down powwows just so that they feel like they're being heard, and that even if someone disagrees with them, that's okay, as long as it's done in the right way. So a lot of what I do, I have posters on my wall. These are some sentence starters. This is a way you can respond to things, so that when they do get to middle and high school, they're able to have those conversations without rioting happening.
Right.
And that's kind of where I'm at with it. So I just make them feel validated and safe. And then from there, we turn it into that teachable how to handle situation.
I don't know about you, but there's been, like, especially this past year, there's been so many times I've passed the school counselor in the hallway and I'm like, you know what? I am not qualified. So this was said in my classroom. I need some help because I don't know where to take it. And
Yes.
I mean, and I think, like, I jokingly say that, but it's the truth. And that's
We
just
are
going
dealing with
back
a lot of topics
to,
that probably should be referred to the counselor, but
Yeah.
they only have so much time as resources as well.
Right.
And with everything that's happened, I feel like we're dealing with even more situations where we need as many counselors as we can cram in a school that we could possibly have, because the kids need it.
yeah.
And they have forgotten, a lot of them, I feel like, because everything was so isolated, a lot of the kids have forgotten how to exist and function in a world where other people also exist and function.
Right.
And because of that, we're seeing conflicts that I had not seen prior to the pandemic. And I'm dealing with issues in my classroom and explosions from these emotions in my classroom that I had never had to deal with as a teacher, and just navigating that. And I'm thinking, wow, like, love to, be able to sign out the counselor and bring her in for, an hour and things like that. So it's just been interesting.
How do you handle that? I mean, having so many like multi-language learners.
I know that someone used the word empowerment, and I feel like that's exactly what I see my role as that the world isn't the same for everybody. And with my students, the world is not the same. The world that they come from and the world that they go home to is not the same as the one that I go to or that even my own daughters go to. And that's the way that things are. And so I think that things that happened during the pandemic, I think the things that happened before the pandemic, I think it made people, we had time to stop and say, actually, this isn't the kind of world that we actually want for ourselves and for our children. And I think because we're teachers, we just so much believe in this next generation. Like, we have to, right? Like, they're going to change so many things. They're going to right the wrongs that we haven't been able to. But I think in order to do that, we have to help them understand that there is social injustice. There is structural racism. There is sexism. There is that there are these things. And is this the world that we're okay with? Or can we as teachers help provide you some tools so that you can actively question that and you can actively say, actually, this isn't okay? Because I feel like each generation we've gotten a little bit better with things, but we're still not there yet. The pandemic showed us it wasn't equal. It wasn't an equal trauma for everybody. And and even just what you're talking about with your students when they come in and it's like an explosive behavior, I just think that's a symptom of the fact that they have experienced things that we haven't at that age.
And they had a long time away from school.
Yep.
Without some of those tools that we teach in guidance, that we teach in our classrooms, with how to deal with those big emotions.
Right.
And families are doing the best they can and trying to.
Right.
They're also not trained counselors.
Right. Absolutely.
And that makes it hard. I've had a number of families come to me and say, what do I do? And I'm
Right.
going, I don't know, but we're in this together.
Yeah.
We're going to get through it. And I think that's what
Hard.
the kids and the families all need to remember, is that we are all in this together and everybody has the same goal. We want these kiddos to grow up and be adults that are going to make a difference and change our world and make it better. And we just need to make them feel more like empowered people who came through something,
Right.
and less like victims that something happened to. And,
Resilience.
And right,
Yeah.
let them know they are resilient and
Yeah.
this is going to be okay. Right now, it's not okay, but it's going to get there.
Right.
And I think as we're doing all these things in our classrooms and families are supporting at home, I just think we're going to see that shift. We're going to see ourselves coming out of everything.
So thinking like to the future, what do you think Red Clay graduates need to have?
I think they need to be people who can see different situations and different people and be able to problem solve together. So no matter what a student ends up doing, whether they become a teacher, whether they become an engineer, whatever it is that they end up doing, that they're going to have to be able to work with other people and to understand that their reality is not everybody's reality, and just because the way that they've done things in their life is not the same thing as someone else, and
Right.
that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that, and that if there are things that are not, just or correct or right, that there would be a way for people to work together, for them to work together with other people to problem solve and to create a more just world. I think that's the most important skill, to be honest. I mean, yeah, reading and writing and math, of course, but I think thinking
Problem
and critically
solving,
thinking,
Perspective
thinking.
taking,
Right.
empathy, like those are huge
Absolutely.
life skills that are not something that is taught necessarily in a textbook, but
Right.
that textbook stuff doesn't really matter if you can't apply it in a real way, in a real situation with real people.
Right.
And so I think we can't let that fall away. We have to make sure we're still exposing them to situations where there's just different perspectives. They have to show empathy. They need to problem solve. I'm not giving you the answer. I think the more we see STEM in our classrooms, the more we bring out some board games and let them figure it out, handle a conflict. Those are things they need that I'm not going to find in my math book or my reading book or my social studies book. And I can't just sit up there and teach them. They have to sort it out. And I have to provide that opportunity. I think as we do that, we'll see our graduates be able to do exactly what you said. But it has to start early and it has to continue. Having game day once a week for an hour in my classroom in fourth grade shouldn't stop in elementary school.
Right.
We've got to continue to provide those opportunities. And I think
So I hate
that's
to do a
good.
plug. But all that you both had described is Portrait of a Red Clay Graduate. And so one of the initiatives that the district is doing, part of their strategic planning, is that. And so the Portrait of a Red Clay Graduate has 4 domains. Multi-level communicator. I think you've seen the posters, right?
Seen the posters,
yep. Communicating with others, entrepreneurial spirit, and what is the 4th one? I should know because I actually worked on the committee to do this. And under those 4 domains, though, there's characteristics that what you just said: collaboration, teamwork, empathy. And I have this kind of hits close to home because my son is graduating this year from Red Clay. And I think about what he's going to need to be successful. And you no longer have to be the smartest person in the room because we all have information at our fingertips. But we do need to be able to be smarter than the machines. And that's only through soft skills, what you had just described.
Right.
And
we
I
need
think
time to do them.
And we need time to do
Time
them.
Time
Right.
to do them.
Exactly.
And
I saw my students grow. This year was a doozy. All my kids forgot how to exist in a world with other people. I had a very high percentage of my children that were remote. it was a doozy. And early on, I realized I have to give them time every week.
Right.
We're pulling out the board games,
Right.
following the rules, we're doing the directions. And when you don't like what that child did,
Right.
I'm going to watch, because can't have anything get
Right.
out of hand. But I'm not going to do this for you. I'm not going to say, little Susie, give little Timmy that.
Right.
No.
Right.
And I saw so much growth between our weekly game day and our weekly STEM activity. They were given a problem, they were given a group, figure it out.
Yeah.
I saw so much growth. Beginning of the year, the very first time I did it,
Right.
I kid you not, I had a third of my class crying.
Right. Right.
I had 2 students leave.
Right.
I had 2 chairs tipped over. And I had somebody throw something. And
Yeah.
I gotta say, I cried that day when I went home. I was like,
Yeah,
I can't
I
do
would
it.
too. Yeah.
I can't do it. I
You
just,
came
we
back
were,
Oh,
and
for
did it
board
again.
games, right?
well, this was part of the STEM.
Oh,
thing.
okay,
And I was like,
okay.
I can't do it. I can't do
Yeah.
it with this class, is what I said. We just won't do this year. I can't do it. Maybe I'll try it again later.
Yeah.
But I can't do this year. And then the more I thought about it, I was like, this is why I have to do it.
Right.
Yep.
By the end of the year, we got our groups. I gave them their baggie of things. We talked about what the challenge was. And I sat back at my desk. And you know, as a teacher, you never just get to sit at your desk, right? I literally sat at my
And
desk.
admin came in.
I think they were just happy nobody was throwing anything. I sat and I watched. And I watched as my 4th grader, who threw something at someone else the first time,
Yeah.
disagreed with someone in their group, compromised and figured it out without me doing anything.
Right.
And I watched as my kids who cried,
Yeah.
no tears.
Yeah.
And I watched when we figured out which one had most successfully, because that's my other thing. You have to be a good winner, and you have to be okay when things don't work. They're bad at that.
Because you're not always going to
Right.
win.
Not always gonna win.
Sometimes
Yeah.
you might lose, and that's okay. So when we did that final project and we figured out which one, like, I think it was something that had to race furthest or fast, they figured it out, and it was like my group that didn't win, their thing flopped. It was, it was all about the process. Their thing flopped, and they congratulated the team that won.
Aw.
Well, these are the kids who had left the first time. And I sat back and just watched my class, and I was like, okay, if they've learned nothing else this year, they've learned to solve a problem with people who disagree with them
Right.
and handle it if it didn't work.
And you did that.
Right.
Done.
Right.
And that's the
Done.
kind of
That's
thing, like, it
amazing.
doesn't
Yeah.
show up on the
Right.
evaluation.
Right.
But it's like all the kids,
Yeah.
everyone has a phone.
Yes.
Like all the information is at your fingertips. So having that, like all the facts memorized,
Right.
like that's not going to set you apart.
No.
That's not going to be what gets you far in
Right.
life. It's going to be that you can work with a group of people, you can collaborate, you can communicate, you can deal with failure.
Well, you have to.
Right.
Right.
And that's like one of the big things I talk about is like we're talking about what we want students to be when they graduate. Well, say you're sitting on an interview committee and you're trying to help choose the next person who's going to join your team, who's going to be a teacher at your school. Like, who are you looking for?
Right.
You're not sitting there and saying, could they name every math standard? Like, we're not worried about like the memorization, you know?
Right.
You're sitting there and you're like, oh,
They
like we
wanna be
gave
part
them
of the team.
a situation and
Yeah.
they thought on their feet. They were able to
Yeah.
creatively think, and they're, they're creative. They seem like someone that we could collaborate with, that can work with what we're thinking, bring new ideas to the table.
Right.
And like, if that's who we want to work with, that's who's going to be successful in our schools. Like,
Right.
that's what we need to push students to
Yeah.
do. We need to teach
Yes.
them how to acquire those skills, and it can't be like, I try to avoid just being like, here's a 10-minute lesson, and now we're going to move on and do what we
Right.
always have done.
Right.
It needs to be like everything you're doing, you can pause and incorporate those skills in it. It's like,
Right.
it needs to be constant.
And I love that you're tying it back to interviews, because that's what I
Yeah.
tell my kiddos too in class. I tell them, we are not educating children, we are educating future adults. And you are going to be someone's boss, someone's employee, someone's spouse. Like, you have to be able to do this. And I tell them when they've done these things and we're talking later privately, is this something that would have promoted you at work? Or is this something that would have caused a problem at work? And they can easily say, because sometimes they want to be right?
Yeah.
But they're able to easily say, oh, I probably would have got fired. Okay, well, you know that you want to be employed, right? Like,
Okay.
so how could you have handled it differently?
Right.
Think like a grown-up. Pretend this is your job and not that you were fighting with little Timmy. Like, pretend. So how could you have handled it that would have not resulted in someone getting fired. So you're tying it into things like interviews and things like that, and I'm doing the same thing in 4th grade in hopes that in the upper grades you start to see that same trend.
And even if that's so distant to some of the students, like I'm teaching
It's the
kindergartners,
blank.
but it's being able to build that skill and it's introduced at the elementary, and then when they go into middle and high school, they're able to keep building, and it's not this foreign concept that they have to like relearn or learn new.
Yeah.
It's this thing that they've been building ever since they've been in school.
And I think it lets them see themselves in the future. It's such an abstract thing, and it lets them picture themselves in the future and see themselves as an employee, as a boss, as someone who is already there to help make those decisions.
And Erin, I think that you did something very powerful today because, you know, you're Teacher of the Year, and you talked about a time when things weren't 100% successful. And I think that's such a powerful lesson, honestly, for every teacher, every human out there, that, you know, being a Teacher of the Year isn't about being perfect or the best teacher out there, because that doesn't exist.
No.
It's about being someone who keeps trying and keeps trying and keeps trying and does the things that we've been talking about. It's been so great talking to you all, and I just feel, honestly, like I really do feel better about coming back after talking to you three. And it just is just another reminder of like how good the teachers are in this district. It's unbelievable. Unbelievable. So
it's going to be a good year.
It's going to be a good
We're
year
going to have hurdles,
because
and things are going to be tough here and there.
That's right.
I think if we remember we have each other to lean on, we're all teachers, we all have the same goal.
Exactly.
It's going to be okay.
That's right.
It's going to be a good year.
That's right. It's not a competition. We're going to get through together, and we're going to all grow. So, well, I hope we can do this again.
Yes.
And you guys, I really just hope that you have a great year, and we'll come back together again sometime.
Absolutely.
Wonderful.
Absolutely.
Thank you.